not only NCERT, but for the states of Odisha and Jharkhand. Attended many international seminars on ELT, presented papers, chaired various sessions, delivered keynote addresses, and has been panelist in various seminars and conferences. She has guided many PhD scholars and has conducted many research in the area of ELT and English literature. Committee for this conference, and I also like to welcome, since I think Sir joined us a bit late, Professor Avdesh K. Mishra, sir, the chairperson. Welcome both of you, ma'am. Now over to you.
Am I audible? Audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, you're audible.
Okay, all right.
So, thank you so much. Now I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Professor Avdesh Kumar Mishra. At the outset, I'm proud to welcome Professor Avdesh Kumar Mishra. He's an eminent educationist, and he's a linguist of our country. Currently, Professor Avdesh Kumar Mishra is working as Professor of Linguistics in Department of Linguistics, English and Foreign Language University, EFL University, Shillong campus. Professor Mishra has received Master's and PhD degrees in Linguistics at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and he also received diploma certificates and diplomas of proficiency in so many languages. I'm really proud to say that he has received certificates and of proficiency in Arabic, German, Pashto, Persian, Russian, Sinhalese, Tamil, and Urdu. And I think he's the right person to deliver the keynote address. He worked as faculty at American Institute of Indian Studies, Varanasi, Assam Central University, Silchar, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, and Northeastern Regional Institute of Education, the NCERT is Neri, Shillong. And he also was director of EFL University, Shillong campus, and director of CIIL, Central Institute of Indian Languages, that functions under MHRD in Mysore. He has more than 34 years of teaching experience, and he has authored 15 books and monographs. He has edited 8 books and numerous research papers in national and international journals. He is an editor-chief of a couple of journals of national repute. And I think at the outset, I said, I'm proud to welcome him. And with this rich biodata of Professor Avdesh Mishra, I'm really proud to invite him to this session and speak on language, culture, and education. Now to Professor Avdesh Kumar Mishra.
Thank you, Madam Professor Sahu, for introducing me so nicely. Now that we are a little late, so what has happened, my thoughts have got a little bit disorganized. Not so much, but a little bit. And I'll try to make it as short as possible because such a topic where see, all these 3 things in themselves are not yet settled, that what we mean by that, language and culture and education. And the problem is that how to integrating all 3 things or show relation among these 3 things which are in themselves broad areas. First thing that comes to mind is that see, when we talk of language, then this one thing we have to keep in mind, that language itself is a product of evolution. And know that we had Homo erectus, and we had Homo neanderthals, Neanderthals were there, and Homo sapiens. So it is said that
voice is breaking.
Yeah.
I think your voice is breaking.
Ma'am, it is quite clear from our end.
Wait. No. I'll join with phone.
Okay.
Unmute me. I'm trying to join my phone, so I can mute me. Unmute me from there. Hello. Phone. Unmute me. Unmute me. Unmute me. Unmute. Unmute me. Unmute me. Unmute me. I'm trying to find my phone. So unmute me.
Abdeshji, I think you have logged in two places. Can you log in only one?
Yes.
You have logged in two places, I think. Can you log in one only?
अभी शुरुआत बहुत बढ़िया हो गई।
Tara problem, no?
Now it's okay. See,
Yes,
you
yes.
had kept me muted. That's why. In my phone, it said that host is not allowing to speak. Okay.
Now it's quite clear. It's quite clear. now.
Yeah. From phone, it works nice. Okay. So what I was saying is that so this is what we understand by language. So it is said that language only made us humans. Otherwise, we would have remained Homo erectus or Neanderthals and so on. And when we became Homo sapiens, with that came one thing, the most important thing, that we moved from body to mind. That was the new thing that came. That means we had certain developments in our brain, especially in the neocortex, the frontal part of the skull, that developed and that gave rise to language. And initially, the language is thought to be based on, say, some facial expressions, hand gestures, and also signs and very simple words like that. And when we became humans, then only we got the so much developed syntactic structures in language. And along with that came the culture. That means people started talking, they had language, and they moved from the foraging species, only hunting and gathering and taking care of the basic needs of their daily life. From that, we moved to something called social society. We became social, and with that came language associated with culture. This is what happened. So it is scientifically proven, and we have say arguments in favor of that idea that language and culture coexisted. They co-evolved. It's not that language came and later on only in 10, 20 years ago, we started having culture. It's not that. Language came along with culture. So they evolved together. Now, what was the need for that? If you look at the structure of language that we have signs, we use words and sentences, and animals also have certain signs. They coo, they make some noises, they bark, etc. So they also have it. The important thing was that animals were concerned with only the present, what is in front of their eyes, now and here, that attitude. But with language and then culture evolving at the same time, the humans got this thing that language became tied to past and future. This gave rise to the culture also, because we had past and we had future. So we can think in terms of the past, what we did, what happened, and how to take lessons from that, and also plan for future so that we can have a better society. That was the reason that the culture evolved along with language. And another important thing that is there for us to understand, see, due to modern development, and we have become such, it has become so automatic in us to consider that language is a thing, which is not true. Language is not a thing. Language is our being. Language is our identity. You cannot separate language from anything, say body or mind or brain. It is part of us. So it's not a thing. And language also doesn't have any content. Content comes from society. Whatever words we have, that's why we have different words in different languages. You will see that because it comes from the society, from the culture. If the words were the symbols and they meant the same thing, and culture and society had nothing to do with that, then in all languages we would have the same words for all the concepts and ideas and things, which is not there. So it is based on that. And the reason for having this kind of, say, culture was that humans became mind person. We moved away from body. In animals, everything is related to emotion. When they are angry, when they are hungry, when they are afraid, they want to fight for finding a mate, etc. Everything related to body, body-centric. But humans, some say 250,000 years ago or so, when we became Homo sapiens, we developed mind. And the problem of modern humans is that we started thinking that language is a thing, and the body is simply the say pedestal for holding the mind, and they are not connected to each other. And then technology came up, and what happens because of technology? Earlier, how humans grow and evolved, that was based on the idea that we have body and mind separately, and so that means we were subject and we were controlling things in our daily life as objects. So we subject and object were different. But with technology, what has happened, we became both the shaper of the technology and being shaped by the technology. That means once we were subjects and many things were objects, but now technology has, say, usurped everything in such a way that humans have become both subject and object. They are the creator and the thing that has been created, both. So that's why we see the divide between language and culture. They seem like as if they are a different thing. So we begin with connecting past with future and not living in present. And one eminent scientist has given this idea based on the computer science. He has taken Morgan, two words, offline and online. So the idea behind culture, having culture, was that humans, the brains, we have evolved in such a way that we cannot all the time live in online activities. We cannot all the time keep on performing online activities. And online activity is here and now. That humans, if the brains are indulged in doing that all the time, thinking and talking about here and now things, then the brains will be dead and will become extinct. So that's why the concept of offline, brain needs relaxation. It needs itself to calm, as it happens when we sleep. That time, brain arranges the information that it has, whatever has come, and then memory is consolidated and so on. So like sleep, the offline activities also helped humans to remain human and keep our brains more active and live longer. That was the idea. Now, what comes under offline activities? So language itself is the online activity, when we talk about the present, here and now. And when we go offline, then that includes the other aspects of language which are related to culture, and that is music, dance, singing, literature, reciting poems. These things are the offline activities. So humans needed both to have a combination of something online, which to take care of daily needs, live in daily life, and then also at the same time give brain time to relax itself. And that can happen by indulging in the offline activities that I mentioned, and that is arts and culture. That was there. So that is very important for us to remember. Then it has some implications on what makes us a human. So according to Darwin, we became humans, and then we all the time we are fighting for survival. And so that is our instinct, that we want to survive longer. But that would have made us only animals. So what Darwin was thinking was that an animal, human as an animal, but because of culture only, we became humans. So that is very important when we think about the language and culture. Then another thing that is there, see, as I mentioned already, that culture can be defined as, say, pattern of human behavior. And culture also includes thoughts, language, practices, beliefs, values, customs, rituals, manners of interacting, and roles, relationships, and expected behaviors of racial, ethnic, religious, or social group, and the ability to transmit all these things to succeeding generations. That is what we mean by culture. And we have a definition given by the UNESCO culture, and it says that culture should be regarded as a set of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features of society or a social group, and that it encompasses, in addition to arts and literature, lifestyles, ways of living together, value systems, traditions, and beliefs. So we have to understand culture in these terms, that it is not only, say, singing or dancing and music, other aspects which are not related to, say, the material culture or something tangible, they are also part of culture. We have a famous linguist and also his questionist, Halliday, and he talks about that language is a social semiotic system. Language is a system which involves social aspects and also semiotic. So as I already hinted, that signs are there in languages, and society gives all the signs the meaning that it has. So that's why he says that when language is social semiotic, that means language is not within the brain only. Language, the words and sentences only. It has something to do with the society as well. So outside, we move outside the language, and when these two things come together, then we call that as culture, and that is what makes us human. So the development of human language is also adaptive to response to the need to represent non-immediate events symbolically. This is what I have already hinted. So, and that separates us from animals. So that also means, in terms of Brunner, that our culturally adapted way of life depends upon shared meanings and shared concepts, and depends as well upon shared modes of discourse for negotiating differences in meaning and interpretation. So what does that mean? That means that individuals in a collective may share many experiences, but different individuals may describe these experiences differently. This is what we mean by sociosemiotic. And as these individuals interact, they will collaborate to find a mutually acceptable expression to describe their experiences. So shared meanings arise, and they are enclosed in the resulting shared expressions. So this meaning negotiation process, a culture shared reality emerges. Because of different human groups may agree upon different ways of referring to their group experiences, different variants of symbolic cultures gradually develop among different populations. So that is what we mean by human and human language and human culture. And you can see that when we say that culture and language are related, they are intertwined, that is, it doesn't become so evident on the surface. But if you look at the grammars of language, any language, you can see, I'll give you quickly some examples that how we can see that culture reflects in language as well. For example, English doesn't differentiate in the second person pronoun between different types of use, whether it's honorific, a respected person, or a child. We address all of them as you. But many languages, including Hindi, we have 2 or 3 pronouns for that. Where does that come from? It would have been enough to have only one form of second person pronoun, that is you. So we could have just managed with tum, as it happens in many of the Indian languages as well. But why do these languages have three, or sometimes we also have, as we see in Tamil and many of the Austroasiatic languages, that you will have we including the hearer and we excluding the hearer. So inclusive pronoun, exclusive pronoun, all these things. So they are dependent on the culture, because culture is there that has determined that what kind of words we'll have. Also, look at another example quickly, that of active and passive voice. So that also is culture dependent. It is not that our brain has made us, or we could have managed with one type of sentence like only active, as many of the languages of the world do. But since we have different languages representing different cultures, so if in a language we have a passive voice construction, so that means that society has developed a way where they develop this idea that will focus on the object instead of the subject, who is doing what. Instead of that, we focus on what is happening, what are the things that are involved. So that also is culture dependent. And another last example that I'll give you here, that we have languages in India. You will see that Tibeto-Burman languages, many of them, and even partly our Indo-Aryan languages also. You'll see that we always have, we talk in terms of we have the pronoun, like in Hindi, we have main and hum also, but most of the time, when we are in conversation, we use hum instead of main. So that is we don't want to show that we are egocentric or focusing on myself only. Others are also involved. So we choose to deviate from using I to we. So this is also culture dependent. So there are many things that you can see. We find things that are dependent on culture, how the culture, the convention, the tradition of a particular language that has given these various means of communication, and which reflects in the grammar also, grammar of a language. And also, language may also affect how individuals experience the world. And as we know that Worf had said, that individuals in an ethno-linguistic group are led by their shared language experiences to acquire shared meaning, shared meaning, habitual ways of thinking, which influence cognition in a general way. So if that is so, then a language a person speaks would determine how the person encodes her experiences. Language can influence encoding or categorization of experiences. So what does that mean? That language, cognition, and culture evolve together in close interactions. And evolution of the brain supports the development of language, which as a communication tool facilitates the creation, perpetuation, renegotiation of shared meanings and cultural consensus. So that means that we can think of language as the symbolic guide of culture. So this is what we mean when we say that language is the principal means whereby we conduct our social lives, and therefore it is bound up with the culture that we have. So culture and language are closely related to each other, as I have already mentioned, and language, the most important part of culture, reflects culture. And it is passed on from generation to generation by learning, not by instinct. That is, language is culturally transmitted. That is also one feature of human language, that in animals, the language is genetic. So that means even if the mother bird or a mother, say dog, doesn't teach her puppy or the newborn bird language, they will learn the language that they have, whatever language they have, not like humans. But in humans, it is not in our genes. It has to be culturally transmitted. Unless a person is placed in a situation where someone is there to talk to the newborn baby, in terms of sounds. So we have heard that motherese, so-called motherese, that mothers, that they sing certain vowels only, or make smaller words. They prolong the pronunciation of the words, like kya chahiye, kaun hai, aha, aja, nahi chahiye, kya lega. So all this is related to music. See, musical, the tone is there in the language that mothers use. So unless a child is put in that situation, the child will not learn or acquire the language. So it is not in our gene only, or it is not instinct, but we learn it when it is culturally transmitted. That means when others are there. And as I gave you the example of Madhuri's, that language is first acquired until the age of 5 or 6, when the child begins to have a proper grammar, the syntax of grammar developed, then only it changes. But before that, all the activities in language mostly involve the tone, the timbre, the rhythm, the stress, intonation, all these things so much. So that also gives leads us to the idea that people think that, see, in a grown-up person, you'll see that language is located in left hemisphere of the brain, and music or arts or culture, all these things are located mainly in the right hemisphere of the brain. And when a person has attained the age of 5 or 6 and she has mastered the language, then singing or music doesn't come automatically, or art doesn't come automatically. They have to be taught. The children have to learn it. So people think that as if they have separated, but the foundation, the basis of whatever we do in language, that has actually been, say, laid by our parents when they use the tone, rhythm, intonation, and that way only language develops. And later on, it goes into different parts of the hemisphere. But the reality is that we are never separated. The right and left hemispheres are never separated. Whatever activities in language we do, whether it's a sentence or a word or a meaning, everything is related to the right hemisphere activities. The time, the space, or having the abstract idea, the musicality, tone, etc., they lie in the right hemisphere. And when these two work together, then only we have the language happening. And everything, almost everything in the right hemisphere is a product of the culture. That means when we were put in a social situation where we had interaction with our parents and other caregivers, and this is how we are connected. Although when we become adult, we don't see that relationship. And also another thing that is important about culture is that culture can both liberate us and also constrains us. That means it liberates by investing the randomness of nature with meaning, order, rationality, and by providing safeguards against chaos. That means it liberates us. So because we have language, that's why we can categorize, we can put less burden on the brain so that it will not have a situation where all the time it is astonished or bewildered. We predict something, and we know the world through our language. So that protects us from chaos. And it also constrains us by imposing a structure on nature and by limiting the range of possible meanings created by the individual. So language is creative. So that's why it also limits the meaning that we can create. That means every culture is the product of this interaction between its material and non-material aspects. So we have certain materials in the world, and also the non-material, our beliefs and values, etc. So when they interact, then the entity which has been invented in isolation. This we have to keep in mind. So although language and culture, they evolve together, but the development of culture is happening gradually and continuously. So a culture is a culture being a building made of different beliefs in supernatural social behaviors, human emotions, ways of expressing feelings, and language continually adapted accordingly to accommodate these identified notion and gesture of human activity. So whatever these things are there, they are shaped according to and continually developed according to the language that we have. So that means learning how to mean is both linguistic and cultural. So we cannot have only language as a thing and only culture and no language. If a person doesn't speak a language, then culture cannot be acquired, or cultural ideas cannot be grasped by the human beings. So meaning occurs through the lens of culture, and this is what the students in our classroom, need to come to understand in language learning, particularly with an intercultural orientation. So language and culture are intertwined in that way, and language and culture, they cannot survive without the other. So language is rooted in culture, and culture is reflected and passed on by language from one generation to another, and so on. So the education system and the culture of a nation, they are inseparable. So you cannot just have, this is what has happened in recent past, that we have separated teaching learning of language from culture. There is nothing called cultural aspects left. So there is no scope for having, say, arts or music or dance or nothing related to anything that is beyond the textbook. We became textbook centric, and since our textbooks are mainly based on the reading, the texts are there and they cannot reflect or they cannot show all these aspects of culture that we have. So that's why we have kind of divorced the two things, that language became a thing and located only in the textbook, and cultural tools and cultural ideas, whatever was there in culture, they are outside it, and there is hardly any scope for that. Now, what could be the outcome for that? What is the problem in that? If you have, say, language and culture divorce, just learn or teach a language like a thing, so from computer or from textbooks, just do that. So what is the problem there? The problem is that, see, we have to move away from, that is what we have done, from remaining animal. So from animal, we have become humans. And what is human? That we remain of also online and at the same time offline. So when these two things come together, that means when the activities of the left hemisphere of the brain, which is language, logic, etc., when they are at tandem with the right hemisphere activity, the things that are there, which are arts, culture, music, dance, all those aspects of culture. So then only humans become complete. And if you do not have this language and culture going together, that means if you do not say have language incorporating cultural aspects, then what will happen? We will not remain social. And one particular thing that becomes a victim of that, if we separate language and culture in language and teaching, is that we lose empathy, that emotion which has made humans humans. So although this is there in animals also, and there is a part of a brain where we have a set of neurons called mirror neurons that fires when we see others doing something. Even if we are not doing something, but others are doing it, then we become ready for that. The brain starts thinking as if so we are doing it. So when someone speaks, our brain is ready for making those sounds and words and sentences. Even the vocal organs are ready for that. If we see someone crying, then our brain is ready. It recognizes that someone is crying, so it is also ready for crying. When someone else suffers pain, then the viewer also, one who sees it, that person also feels the pain. That is what we mean by empathy, being aware of others' feeling. And that is, although it is partly there in animals, but everything related to hunger, anger, fear, and so on, just those basic bodily emotions. But empathy is one thing that is so developed in human. So if you separate the language and culture, then we become a machine where we have only humans as a subject and object both, and the language controls us. We have nothing called mind interacting with what we do in daily life. So we lose empathy, and that is the result, as we see in today's society, the younger generation, people, even adults, we don't have, say, place for others. We have become so insensitive. Like we see someone in pain or suffering, objectively we see that, yes, okay, that person is suffering or that person is in pain, but we do not act on that as a humans. We leave that person as she is. So this is what has happened. And empathy can be taught. It is not there that it will develop on its own. Empathy comes only by social interaction. And since language is the means of culture and emotions are part of culture, especially the empathy, that is what makes us pro-social, social animals. So if you separate language and culture, then what will happen? We lose the empathy. That is the most important emotion in humans, and then we become less human. So that is very important for us to understand, that we must have in education system the integration of both language and the culture, and especially these things like music, song, art forms that we draw, etc. And what is the reason for that? You must be thinking that, see, why we need music there, why we need art. And the important thing is that, see, as I hinted, language is language has a feature called time binding, human language, that it can relate to past and also to future. So language is time bound, and online activities are also time bound. That means taking care of here and now things in our daily life, which is problematic, which gives rise to anxiety. It gives rise to worry when we are all the time interacting with our daily life situations. So what happens then? So we need some offline activities, and in art, literature, music, dance, and all these forms of culture, they are not bound to time. A poem is not bound to time. It has no past, no present, no future. Music doesn't have any past, any present, any future. Dance doesn't have any past, any present, any future. So all the religion doesn't have the spirituality, the religious, say, rituals or the acts that we perform, they are timeless. There's no time in it. We don't think of time, the daily life situations, the online activities. We transcend time in all these activities. That's how it is very important that we have incorporation of these things so that brain can survive longer. We know that what has happened. See, there is a theory in science, thermodynamics, that when things become anything that becomes complex, then it disintegrates because it needs more energy. So think of the thermodynamic principle situation humans have. So humans have become more complex. Neanderthals were complex, but then Homo sapiens became more complex because we had language, we became social, and instead of remaining hunter and gatherers and taking care of daily needs, we moved ahead of that. We had time binding in our language. So our brains, our bodies, they became very complex, and we need more energy to conserve that. And what will that lead to? It will disintegrate us. It will lead to our extinction. And this is what has happened with many of the animals and even many of the species of humans. So only species that we are left with is the Homo sapiens. Others are disintegrated because they did not know how to manage this complexity that was coming up. And so modern humans, because of culture, these offline activities, which includes art and culture, as I mentioned. So because of this only, the brain had to work less so that energy can be consumed less. Because when you perform online activities, that requires more energy because we are concerned with the present. And that means we have several options for the brain, several alternatives for the same thing, and brain gets puzzled, so it has to work more. But when there's no time and the brain is relaxed, then we need less energy. So this is how modern humans made themselves comfortable in terms of saving, conserving energy. Brain doesn't have to work so much. So that is the importance of a culture being integrated in language, whether it's teaching, learning, or in daily life also. So yeah. How much time, Sanjay ji? Just 2-3 minutes more?
3 minutes.
Okay. Another thing that has happened, why in education we need to have integration of language and culture, is that one basic thing in language is that we categorize. This is what humans do. We categorize our worlds. So whatever we see, for example, see, when we look at a chair, we don't say, it has become so automatic in adults that we don't remember that what different types of chairs are, what different shapes can be there, or how many hands will be there, or what kind of back seat is there, etc. We don't think of that. It has become so automatic, habitual. But initially, this is what humans do, and even the children do. that we categorize the world. That means we extract the distinguishing features from the related things or related ideas, and that becomes the prototype. And then we have only those categories. It reduces the work of brain if you categorize. If you have to remember all the time that what is good or what is cat, what is dog. Okay, so dog has these features, and no language can describe the difference between dog and a cat or between a table and a chair. Through language, you cannot do it. By looking at it, by categorizing only, by extracting the features, the abstract features, that only can make us understand, even for adults or scientists or PhD persons. We cannot define what is cat, what is dog using a language. So we have categories. So this is how we categorize our world, whether things or concept or idea. And then what happens when we categorize things, that reduces the brain's work, fine. And this is how we live longer, because that is the goal of humanity. That is the goal of humans, that we remain not animal, and also we prolong the life of our bodies. And so what will happen? Categories are there, fine, but then categories also give rise to prejudices, biases. We forget to see others' perspective because we have fixed categories that, okay, this makes chair, so this is chair. Then we forget table and other things. We don't remember about it. When we have the house, so house, we have certain categories. We have category of house, and certain distinctive features are there, which makes house. There is a famous example in Gestalt theory based on someone's art. I forgot the name of the artist, where, see, a picture of a woman is there, where it is distorted. The picture, the painting is such that it is distorted in such a way that a face in that art has two noses and two mouths, but still the features makes us understand. You very famous Picasso or someone. So if you look at that piece of art, so it's so distorted, but every human can identify that art is that image is that of a woman, not a man. What is that? So everything is distorted, the hair, the nose, the mouth, no, at different angles, etc., but we can still recognize it. So that way, so we are made to think, categorize things and idea, so we forget to take care of others or think of others. So exclusion happens, prejudices come up, biases come up, and then they become habit. And because of these things, what will happen? The empathy, that emotion gets lost. And it is empathy that makes us human, that makes us a perfect man in society. So what will happen if we categorize and then we have good, bad, or say high, low, Hindu, Muslim, or say poorly dressed, nicely dressed, sexy, non-sexy, hot, or cool, etc. What will happen then? So if children are bombarded with these things, categories, and then they become habits, and children see everything from those perspectives, then they become so individualistic, and there's no place for other. And the goal of education is, ultimate goal is that we make ourselves better citizens. Humans, the children, or anybody becomes a better citizen of a nation, and also a man. That means not remain animal, only engaged with the online activities and only that language gives us, or not remain an object of the things that we have. Rather, we remain social, and where we have everyone included. So through education only, these things can happen. So by changing our materials, the textbooks, the activities, then connecting the online activities that we are reading a text, and then also connecting it with something that is beyond it. No, we move beyond it, and there we bring the art and culture, because they are not time bound, and they are not costly also, and no one can be wrong also. See, in reading a text or in any classroom, we see that one important factor is anxiety. The children have so much anxiety that they are not responsible to or responsive to what is happening, because they are so anxious, they are worried they may go wrong. But these forms of culture, these forms of art, there no one can be wrong. Whatever interpretation you give to a poem, it will always be right. Whether every child can be right. So see, there's no scope for being wrong. And since there's no time attached to it, so brain doesn't have to work a lot there. So that's why we need to have the education involving both, integrating both language and culture. And since culture happens only through language, and language happens only through culture, so that's why both the things have to be there in our education. And if you do that, then we can take care of all these shortcomings that humans have, or the children have, that only look from the point of view of the categories that they have there in their minds about everything. And then we have interaction, because these forms of art and culture, they lead us to interactional harmony. That is the feature. So when you dance, when you sing together, or see, like national anthem, it happens, or when you engage yourself in making a film or drawing something together, so that then that leads to interactional harmony. And through interactional harmony, the changes happen in the categorized no items, the categories that we have. We accommodate others. We see others' perspective also. And children start doing that. What other things are also possible? It's not the only way that I have about things. Others are also there. And when teachers are also made aware of that, they have knowledge about all the art forms, the culture, other cultural tools, etc., and how to use them, then only they can negotiate it. So if you have a bad teacher, so teachers themselves do not know how to integrate that, and how, say, music can be used or song can be used in classroom, or how art can be used at different levels, etc., and they are not aware that there are differences, then teacher will also kind of say propagate only one kind of culture, only one kind of idea. So in favor of only one religion or one belief or one system, so that also will be harmful. So both teachers and those who prepare the educational materials, and also the students, they have to work together. And if this happens, then we will have better citizens and complete man, not just two-legged Homo sapien, say, being an animal, rather a man. So this is what I had to say at this point of time, since it is a big topic, and more time should have been there. And also I got a little bit disorganized because of the time lag that we have. Yeah, thank you for listening to me, and I wish this conference a great success, which will be there when Sarjug Yadavji is coordinating it, and we have so many people like Professor Sandhya Sahu and others involved with it. So all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for just giving your consent as a keynote speaker. Now, I request ma'am to invite some questions from the participants. Ma'am.
Thank you, Avdeshji. And though you say that initially that you got a little bit disorganized because of the time, I mean,
arranged my thoughts, but then no.
But it was all good, and all the
Thank you.
topics you have,
Thank you.
I mean, one by one you have talked about. You spoke so nicely, and it is really an enlightening and entertaining presentation on language, culture, and education. And because you have brought connection between language, culture, and education, and the three things were also very were clarified. And I would like to summarize also, because there are certain takeaways that I personally felt that I should take away from like whatever you spoke. And it actually, I'm really thankful to you for this stimulating speech from your vast experience. You are so well read and so knowledgeable, and I know you for last so many years, and it is really pleasure listening to you, and I feel like listening to you more. I know that you are hurrying through, but I try to note down certain important points. First, let me ask the participants if they have some questions to ask you, and then I'll conclude. Any question to Professor Avdeshji?
I'll turn off the video so that that becomes fast. Yeah.
Any question from the participants?
their online activity is on. That means they're worrying about food, lunch, or eating something. So,
maybe it's going to be two, so maybe
right.
the long session. So, but Adeshji, actually, you spoke so well about the different type. What is language? What is the why do we need language? How language made us different from animals, and we became Homo sapiens. And you also quoted Darwin. You quoted Halliday. You quoted Brunner. So you have, I mean, enriched us with all these the thoughts of these great people. You also talked about what UNESCO has also said. The most important thing that I would like to tell our viewers is that obviously talked about language is culture dependent. He also said that like how the left hemisphere is for knowledge and all that, and right hemisphere is talking is for music and all these. They what he says that it is not. I mean, tangible, like it is. Other things are material, but these are these things, they are non-material things. So how we will combine this non-material and with material? For example, I mean, how to integrate thoughts, religion, belief, and you also talked about spirituality. So these are all parts of language, also parts of our culture, and we have to integrate all these things when we are talking about our education system. And I'm really happy that you talked about art integrated learning, because that is the in thing now. We are talking about art integrated learning for last so many months, and even our Prime Minister, our like MHRD, they all are trying to do a lot for bringing art, music, theater, drama, all these things into education, while teaching geography also, how these things can be utilized. So in a
Right.
way, we are also like, they are also trying to integrate these two things to bring an integration between language and culture, because these things, they represent culture. You also talked about thermodynamics. I really liked it, because the principle of thermodynamics dynamics is really, I mean, applicable here. And you also talked about Gestalt theory, and the piece of human face you talked about, categorize. And in fact, because I'm also textbook developer, and I also maybe I have to change after listening to you, that we must not categorize, but we must make our children think and appreciate, analyze in different levels. And there are multiple levels to a particular situation. You said that poem cannot have only one interpretation, it must have multiple interpretation. And lastly, I mean, I'd like to tell you that you talked about bringing interactional harmony. So until unless you interact with culture, you interact with people, interact with society, and it is very difficult for us teachers to make our children sensitive to other people's needs and other people's pains. So you talked about empathy, and I'm one with you, because empathy is the most important thing that our children are lacking nowadays because of this online. So when you are online, that is you as you said, it is only in present, but yes, offline integrates all other things. So it is whatever you have said, it is all, I mean, it is pointer, or it will be good for the textbook developers, teachers, and the students. You have said that these three should work together to be a complete man. And that is the thing that we want our education system to work for. So we talk about quality education, we talk about quality language teaching. So language teaching is again in integration with culture. So there are many things. I have written all these points, and now the
Thank you
time is
so much.
short. I cannot, I mean, because all these things I have kept in mind, and I'll also use these in when I try to develop textbooks and teaching learning materials also while giving teacher training to the teachers. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Abhishek. So
Thank you.
now over
Thank you. My
to
pleasure.
Sharyug. Sharyug, if
Thank
you
you.
have something to say. Sharyug?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am, for chairing the session. And I am also grateful for Professor Abdesh Kumar Misra, sir, because he has been always very helpful to us. And this was a very relevant talk. And I can see on the chat box that many appreciations came here. So now here we would like to just now stop for the time being, and now again at 2:30 our afternoon session will begin. So thank you, ma'am, for being with us, and once again we are grateful to both of you for making it successful.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much. My
Sharyug,
pleasure.
thanks to Abdesh for this stimulating speech.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
You.
Okay.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
ये सर आपको देख
2:30 वाला सेशन अब चलेगा, है ना, आधा घंटा बीच में ब्रेक मिल गया है ना, क्योंकि 1:56 अभी हो रहा है ना, तो फिर हम लोग 2:30 में जुड़ जाएंगे, है ना, अभी लीव कर दें।